right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the inaugural edition of Energility, Connecting the Dots. It's our webinar series focused on bringing you relevant information about conserving energy and protecting our environment. Today's webinar is going to focus on energy management and incentives because it's not just about identifying what needs to be done to manage energy consumption, but it's also about ways to keep the energy conservation measures within the financial reach of our organizations. I'm Richard Alexu, Manager of Strategy and Business Development with Energility. And before I turn it over to my colleague, Justin, I just want to touch on a couple of basics and ground rules for today. During the presentation, all microphones will be muted, so we can get through the material efficiently. I like sneaking in the word efficiently whenever I can. But we will be opening up for questions at the end. There'll be plenty of time for that. Number two, the session will be recorded. That's for those unable to join today, as well as for anybody that wants to go back and visit or review any topics of interest. Just go to YouTube and search for Energility, and you'll see our webinars stored there. So please just note that we are recording. We will also be sharing a copy of the slides after the presentation, so don't worry about trying to capture everything as we're going through it. We're going to start with about 25 minutes of presentation with actionable insights and strategies on energy management and incentives, and we'll follow that up with another 25 minutes or so for questions and answers. As questions come to mind, please just enter them into the chat function on the side of your screen, and we will queue them up and talk to them later. So with that, I'd like to introduce Justin Kale, Director of Opportunity Development here at Energility. Take it away.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks, Rich.
You're welcome. And
thanks, everybody, for joining us or for grabbing this video at a later point and checking out some of these insights. It's kind of real-time content relevant to the current state of affairs, where there's a lot of incentives and money coming out of Washington for the state of Ohio and other states around the nation. We are a central Ohio-based but Ohio-focused company, so a lot of the things that we'll share today are specific to Ohio, but many of them are also transferable elsewhere. And appreciate everybody's latitude with us as we do our first, we'll memorialize that. We'll call this our first YouTube live video here. So let's get into connecting the dots on energy efficiency and energy management. There we go. Everybody should see a screen that looks a little bit familiar to you. Energility logo and energy management and incentives. Looks like a little technical difficulty here. There we go. Looks like we got it. Just a delay. So again, thanks again. Appreciate your patience as we go through this. We'll try to go through this expeditiously and hit these things succinctly, but we want to kind of dive into energy management and what it is, some of the incentives and what they are and how you get them. Really, energy management, when we talk with our clients, and we deal with folks from small mom and pop shops, nonprofits, big commercial industrial folks. It's really, energy management's a journey. It's not just a destination that you're trying to get to, a 2030 goal or a 2050 objective. It's really about continuous improvement. And Dr. Edward Deming from decades gone by created this cycle of continuous improvement called plan, do, study, and act. And that's similarly to how we approach energy management. It's about getting data looking at buildings, doing some analysis, doing some planning, getting some actions together, but also getting people together to, plan those, this journey and take those actions, and also then measure and verify that these are getting the results that you're looking to achieve. As we talk about energy management with our clients, it's about more than just energy, because building an energy plan is about, hey, what are the energy type projects? HVAC, lighting, things that people think of, but what are some other, benefits that go into a more energy efficient heating and cooling system? Doing more with less, that's the great American way. But, certainly if we can have a more efficient heating and cooling system and make people more comfortable, better control, give them, power to be able to control their local thermostat, great. How do we improve stewardship for our resources, both financial and environmental? Great. Those are all things that are more than just energy in terms of energy management. One of the tools that we use quite frequently, and folks are probably familiar with, is the program called Energy Star from the Environmental Protection Agency. Looking at buildings' energy consumption and the impact that it has on the environment. Energy Star has a metric that's a 1 to 100 score. It's pretty easy to translate to folks. This is basically if you have a high score, 75 to 100, you are a high performing building. If you're 1 to 25, low performer, or as we refer to it, lots of opportunity. But really, when we start breaking this down a little bit, this helps us compare to other buildings that are similar. Office buildings, houses of worship, some elements of manufacturing have the ability to use this tool, and it's a good, again, simple metric to be able to utilize. And also it gives us some actionable feedback. If you got a 1 to 25 score, you're probably going to have to pump a little bit of money, some capital into your building to make it more efficient. Versus if you're in this 52 to 74, a few tweaks, a little tune up, those types of things, incremental changes can go a long way. So again, one of the common themes you'll hear us talk about in building an energy plan is, beyond energy, because it's about energy savings. That's where the conversation starts. But whether it's a building certification like Energy Star, reducing your environmental footprint, and sometimes folks, we're getting quite a few calls more frequently from manufacturers that are in the supply chain, where they have a primary manufacturer that says, hey, we need to meet a carbon footprint objective, or we have a set of metrics we have to achieve in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And we need you to comply with those to continue being part of the friends of the family, so to speak. And then there's other, non-utility cost savings, things like improving revenue, not pumping as much money into the AEP and First Energy bank accounts as you can for your own business, quality and productivity improvements. So there's non-utility cost savings. And one of the, non-energy cost savings items we're going to talk about is some of the incentives and how we get those. So the first incentive that we'll talk about is rebates. So a lot of folks are familiar with rebates. It's basically you buy something, you get a refund. In this case, it's doing a capital project, a big HVAC, a lighting project, something where you're putting some capital in your building, you're investing in your building, and you're doing it in an efficient way, and energy efficient lighting, heating, cooling system. These are eligible for all businesses. However, they're a little different than the rebates that you may be familiar with from a decade ago or 15 years ago. Instead of being individually driven by the different utilities, these are actually funded by the RTO. We don't have enough acronyms in life, so we got to add one more. This is simply the conductors of the railroad, the electric grid behind the scenes. How do all these different utilities get connected? Well, that's through a regional transmission operator. And in Ohio, we have AEP and First Energy, used to be Dayton Power and Light and Duke Energy, big utilities, and we have a bunch of municipalities. All of them are connected by this RTO called PJM in Ohio. And simply put, the grid operator is giving some rebate for an efficient project because that limits their investment in infrastructure, investment in building new power plants, and things like that. I used to do municipal consulting, got asked that all the time. Why are you giving money away? Well, it's not necessarily giving it away for nothing. It's you're making an energy efficient choice that's going to be around for 10 or 15 years, like a lighting project or a heating, cooling project, compressed air, or something like that. The point here is these rebates are a little different in so much as they're quantified by the regional transmission operator, PJM, and then they're paid out in quarterly payments over 4 years. So, for example, this is from a small manufacturer that we just did a energy plan for. They had about 100 kW reduction in their electric load. And so it's going to make them eligible for about $3,500 in rebate, but it's paid out in 16 equal payments. So it's about $200, a little over $200 per quarter. Again, it's something, but it's probably not going to tip the scale of, a big multi-million-dollar project. So, again, it's a rebate, it's out there, and it's possible. You just got to know how to access it. Now, grants, big topic of conversation, especially since August of 22, when the Inflation Reduction Act passed and its predecessor, the IIJA, or the Investments in Infrastructure and Jobs Act. And, some people refer to that as the free money. Now, we all know there's no such thing as a free lunch. However, the Washington, D.C. is pumping money out for incentives in making buildings more sustainable and more energy efficient, adding renewable energy to the grid. And so, while these things may be viewed as free, we have received some advice from accountants that those could be treated as income. Now, this is probably a good segue to be able to mention, we are energy consultants, we're energy experts, and we do a lot of connecting of the dots, energy, economics, environment. We're not accountants, but we stay closely connected to some smart people in the accounting world. And so we are sharing this advice in that context is, these are great energy incentives and opportunities, and really getting your accountant involved, and we'll talk about that here a little later, is really a best practice in obtaining incentives. So we can give you this advice from an energy perspective, but you're also going to want to seek out your financial counsel as well. So here in the state of Ohio, the Ohio Department of Development, they are the operators of the state energy program. And the state energy program is funded by the Department of Energy and a number of grants that regularly come through there. That's a question we get frequently is, hey, there's money coming from the Department of Energy. Where is it? How do I get a hold of it? Well, the Ohio Department of Development is the best resource for that. And it's eligible for any business in the state of Ohio. The way I explain it to folks is if you're a single family home, that would be a residential program. Other than that, if you're making some sort of widgets, you probably fit into some program in manufacturing. And if you're in any other type of commercial real estate that's not manufacturing, there's an opportunity there for you as well. But it's really for all Ohio businesses. And the state has a new program coming up here in 2024 called the Advanced Energy Fund. We'll talk about that here in just a second. The federal government has a particular program for energy from the U.S. Department of Agriculture called the REAP program, or Rural Energy for America program. And it's for businesses that are both classified as small, according to the SBA, and classified as rural, based on the USDA's classification. Now, the simple thing here in Ohio is basically if you don't sit in the center of Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Dayton, Toledo, if you don't sit in one of the big cities, you're probably fitting into that rural classification. And then whether the business is classified as small by the SBA would be the other defining criteria. And these are about energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. So now what's this big mess of numbers we're sharing here to the right? Well, this is really just a reflection of the way a lot of these grants are situated. They have slightly different criteria. So as the Department of Development has more grants come online, they had a couple in 2023, and they're having some more here in 2024. They will have a similar format. They're going to put together a scoring criteria that looks something like this. The USDA has slightly different scoring criteria, but you can see there's some common themes here. At the Department of Development, they give a 5% or 5 points out of 100 for how much funding do you have to match this project? Are you coming asking for 100%, or do you have some matching funds? And in particular, the USDA gives you 10 points for that. So again, slightly different. But they're both looking for projects that reduce energy or have an energy replacement from the grid with renewable energy. The state has a 50-point score for a well-defined project, cost estimates, use of funds, descriptions, etc. USDA, if it's replacing energy or saving energy, they're giving you 25 points out of 100. Again, the key takeaway here is there's slightly different criteria, but it's all about competitive scoring and how they're awarding some of this money. The investment tax credit is another one that is fairly popular that folks are talking about is, hey, I want to do solar. How do I get a hold of that investment tax credit? Well, a couple key points here. One, it's for all businesses. And yes, that's for you nonprofit and local government folks. Even though you're not paying into the tax system, you are eligible based on the Inflation Reduction Act to be able to take a tax credit towards a solar project. Again, the administration is trying to incentivize more renewable energy on the grid. And so they've provided some credits that are available for all businesses. Now, again, the point here is there is a matrix here that we've populated just to show you some different ways that these tax credits can be monetized. So this is, again, a credit. So it's against income taxes. It's based on your capital cost of your project. So let's just, for our example's sake, we have a 100 kW solar project that's going to generate some energy that's going to replace it from the grid. And the project cost, this is the capital cost investment, let's say it's $250,000. Based on that, there's a 30% tax credit that's available. So in any example, and we're going to show you a couple different examples here, you can get $75,000 directly refunded for putting in this 100 kW solar project. If the project is designed as American made, then you're eligible for another 10%. If it happens to be situated in an energy community, basically a community with socioeconomic disadvantage or where there have been some displacements of coal and fossil fuel-based jobs, that's an energy community. There are some tools that are out there to be able to identify, does your zip code or your census tract fit in an energy community? And also, is your project on an office building, a manufacturing plant, or is it on affordable housing? Well, affordable housing has another 10% bonus. The reason we've showed you these 5 different examples is you can stack up these credits. It isn't just, I got to pick one or another, or, hey, I want 30% because that's the highest. I don't want the others. You can actually stack these up. So if you have a solar project that is made with American-made products in an energy community on an affordable housing project, you could potentially get 60% of that project back in the first year. So again, we show that in showing up in year 2, because you got to do the project and then you get the money refunded. Oh, bump to my screen ahead, give you a little insight onto what we're going to talk about next. But again, the point is you can stack up these credits. So maybe you have an American-made project, but you're not in an energy community and you're not affordable housing. You can still get $100,000 out of your $250,000 back. And it's through the process that the IRS calls direct pay. So that's what allows the local governments and nonprofits to be able to take advantage of it, because you're not paying into the tax system, but you would file what would be analogous to a tax return, and you would get a direct payment back after that return is processed, showing how much your project costs, where it's located, et cetera. Now, 179D is another income tax-based incentive, but which is also eligible for all businesses. Yes, nonprofits, local governments included. This is actually a deduction. So it becomes a little bit more complicated because it's not the dollar for dollar credit that the investment tax credit is able to return to you. And as well, it becomes a little bit more complicated when you're a nonprofit in the local government, because instead of taking this through a tax return, you actually have to assign this to a mechanical contractor, an engineer, whoever's considered the design professional on the job. And then again, just like the investment tax credit, there are some bonuses available for using prevailing wage and apprenticeship programs. The key takeaways from the 179D tax deduction is that it's really based on your building's area, how well the energy project is designed. Does it save 25% or does it save 50% of the energy baseline? And so you need to get an engineer, you need to get an accountant involved, because the other factor is, because this is a deduction, it's based on what tax liability the entity has. If you're a for-profit business, you're taking advantage of it. If you have a 21% tax rate or a 37% tax rate, you're going to have different value in terms of cash for that project. So again, we do a lot of math, and just showing you a couple of examples of how this may apply to different scenarios. If you have a small building with a well-designed project using the maximum amount of program benefit, or the multiple of 5 with high tax liability, it's still only going to yield $9,000. And you're going to have some capital cost in the project, but that's not a factor in your 179D tax deduction project, other than the typical tax rule of you can't get more tax back than what you invested in the basis of your project. Again, the other end of the spectrum is I have this really big building, 100,000 square feet, with just a 25% energy savings, not using the prevailing wage and apprenticeship programs, and have very low tax liability. Well, that tax benefit's only worth $5,000. And again, depending on size of building, energy savings, what type of prevailing wage and apprenticeship programs, and tax liability, you throw all that stuff in the pot and you mix it up, your recipe is going to result in a slightly different cash value, from a few $1,000s to maybe $40,000 or $50,000. Again, we know we're going to hit these at a high level. If you have any questions, feel free to pop those in the comments so we can address those independently here once we're done. Another incentive that's available here in the state of Ohio is from the Ohio Air Quality Development Authority. And what they do is they provide the Ohio businesses that are borrowing capital an exemption towards improvements on their real estate taxes, as well as their sales tax on the construction cost of their projects. So again, this isn't for your $1 million project that you're going to pay cash for, and you can still get your investment tax credits and 179D deductions and those other incentives. But this is specifically for if you're financing a project, you have the ability to utilize their Air Quality Development, Ohio Air Quality Development Authority, or OAQDA program. Now, it's also called the Clean Air Improvement Program, because Rich and I don't come up with enough acronyms on our own. We have to look to the agencies to help us. So this, again, is an exemption from real estate taxes and sales tax. And you'll notice, and this is a snapshot from a client of ours that did approximately $1 million project. And then on the county auditor site, that $1 million, transfers at 35% to taxable value here in the state of Ohio. So it's about $330,000 of improved value that's taxable. And then you'll notice when all of the elements of their tax bill are lined up, they have a reduction here of $43,000 per tax bill. So again, it's got a lot of math involved, and this owner got their accountant involved to confirm the numbers. But the basic premise here is they were borrowing money, so they're taking on some liability with the debt service and the long term. But this exemption stays with their property for the duration that they're borrowing money for. So again, another incentive that is stackable and available here in the state of Ohio for an energy efficiency or renewable energy project. Now, as we kind of wind up our explanations and sharing here, kind of our key takeaways are, incentives make good projects even better, especially financially. Again, we're trying to connect the dots on the energy, the economics, and the environment. And these projects that are good can be incentivized to be even better. And that's really the reason why incentives exist. In some cases, it's to do things you wouldn't otherwise do, or it's to, improve the economics to make them more attractive and maybe prioritize them a little higher. And it takes, a good bit of math to make these things work. Again, whether it's engineers or accountants, consultants like ourselves, there's a lot of variables that come into play, and you need to make sure that you're understanding where the program rules are and how they are applied. It's really also important to know that these are, in most cases, very stackable. You can take advantage of multiple items. These are not necessarily one or another. And I'll show you an example of kind of maybe one of the more complicated, but very valuable ways that we have become attuned to looking at these incentives. And so lastly, when we focus on building an energy plan, again, it's about the journey. It isn't just a one and done project. And one of the things that happens when we start getting into the math of this is you start looking at a project that you're doing a once in a generation of a building, or, a facility manager you may be at a facility for 10 or 15 years. You're probably not going to replace the HVAC every couple of years. You may get a chance to do it once. So you want to do it right. And doing a project right with the right contractor, the right consultant, the right engineer, the right design folks, the energy savings dwarfs, in a lot of cases, the incentives. So making sure you get the project right is really the big takeaway from even focusing on incentives. You still want to get the right project, not just get a project done. Now, this is, again, apologize in advance. I don't want to make your eyes bleed. And if you're not, excited about Excel the way some of us get, this may not speak to you, but we want to share it in a way that does. And really, this is about looking at, a financed project that takes advantage of an exemption from real estate taxes. It has a lot of energy savings associated with it, but it's taking advantage of deductions, tax credits, additional depreciation. And the key takeaway is you see the red on the left-hand side, because this owner is borrowing money. But at the same time, from a cash flow standpoint, it's cumulatively cash flow positive every year. Again, this is where good accountant advice comes into play. A lot of the incentives that we shared with you today are carry forward. So you can take advantage of them the first year, or if you don't have the liability, you can continue to carry those forward with appropriate accounting practices. Again, the bottom line is this owner was investing about $8 million into their facility. It turns out to be about $12 million with repayment, and the energy savings alone, because it was well designed, is $9 million over the life of the project. But the additional incentives between the real estate tax, the deductions, the credits, depreciation, gives them a cumulative effect of about $4.6 million over the life of this project. So again, over half that, $16 million in benefits comes from a energy savings project. So the energy savings is more than half of that project, but it's about $7 million also worth of incentives. Going to leave this up for a second so that you can take a chance. If you aren't already connected with me on LinkedIn, let's connect. You got my contact information and the phone number, email. Let's talk. I love to drink coffee. Let's have a cup of coffee and talk about incentives.
All right, so I'll feed you one of the questions that I typically get asked, Justin. Do incentives require proof that a project has delivered the changes that were actually contemplated when it was designed?
Oh, great question. So the short answer to that is, again, having good people involved as far as consultants, engineers, et cetera, can give you reliability and comfort that it's planning to happen. If you're going for a rebate, like the PJM rebates that we talked about, they don't just file that paperwork. That is actually goes through a regulatory process to be able to assign a value to that lighting project or that capital project. So the organization we work with, in some cases, C-Power, actually requires that there's some verification that that has happened, that's real equipment has really been installed. The other end of the spectrum is the air quality program. Actually, for them to give that incentive for the real estate taxes, they're doing that because there's a expectation that there's clean air project, energy efficiency or renewable energy. And so there's actually a requirement in that you have to do a measurement verification. So you got to put the project in as it was designed and specified, but then also after a year, you have to start, you're kind of on the clock to make sure that the savings are actually real and realized.
Got it.
A lot of the owners want to make sure it is because they're counting on it for their budgets, but to continue to get that incentive, it's also a good idea. And there are some penalties with some of those things that if they don't happen.
Okay. Another one that I typically get is how can I find out which incentives do I qualify for?
You mean besides call us?
I didn't want to give the answer away.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things I will toot our own horn and say we do a good job of is being able to not just be the technical nerds in the room and understand how to do the math, but we also have relationship with the Department of Development, have relationship with some folks that do the PJM rebates and the USDA. Everything that we just shared today actually is publicly available in some way, shape, or form or another. So while you can do a lot of Googling, again, it goes back to having good partners, build an energy plan, get connected to the incentives,
Right.
And then the proof's in the pudding, as they say. You gotta put the recipe together, but ultimately you got to cook up the right meal and serve it.
And through our relationships, what we often see or occasionally see are funds that get made available on short notice. So having our fingers on the pulse of the right individuals in the industry, we can bring them to clients that are looking and are ready to go.
Yeah.
If they've done their homework and they have a project well defined on short notice.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good point too, because I think you've probably said this a number of times too. I know I've shared it a lot with clients lately, is with the fact that a lot of this money is coming out of Washington at different rates. There was this, hey, we passed the IRA in August of 22, and it seemed like there was a big gap, and everybody was kind of like, when's it coming? When's it coming? When's it coming? But now we're at a point where there are different, tranches of money that is coming out. And again, it's going to the state energy program. It's going to the different agencies. And one of the easiest ways for them to be able to say, hey, we want to appropriately distribute these funds, and we also want to maximize the impact and the value for it. The easiest thing for them to do is that ASHRAE level 2 energy audit, that we build our energy plan on. That's kind of the gold standard. And so, again, whether it's a lender lending money or whether it's an agency, deploying taxpayer funds, that energy plan in place gives the step up. So like when a grant is popped up, with 90 days notice to get an application in, you don't have to do the energy plan and then also develop the project. Kind of a well done, fully baked apple pie.
Right.
We got pudding, we got pie, we're serving up dessert.
Is it possible to apply for incentives if I've already started my project?
Good question. Really depends on the program. The rebates are after the project is done. And so, those types of projects, if you're already starting, again, as we saw the math, maybe a couple $100,000 project getting $3,500 isn't really a big needle mover. So that may just simply be, hey, I'm doing the project anyway. What can I get for that? Grant funded projects like Department of Development, USDA, the air quality exemption, all of those projects, our experience tells us you got to get the application in, you got to get awarded or some sort of written notification, some sort of pre-qualification that, hey, the project has been approved. In particular, it's interesting you mentioned that because here about a year and a half ago, the USDA moved from only a couple times a year reviewing and approving projects to now they're on, and they're hopefully soon to release the schedule for next fiscal year. But here over the last year and a half, they'd shifted to a quarterly cycle. So they were taking in projects every quarter, but then it was taking them some time to get those award notices out. But the key takeaway is for those types of programs, you got to have, some validation that the project's been approved, awarded. You really want to make sure you have something in writing that says, hey, here's the scope of work and here's how much money you're going to get before you start putting your purchase order down or spending money.
Controllers and CFOs typically want to know that, don't they?
Yeah. It's not just a good idea, but it's actually legit.
And then one of the more common types of questions that I get also is around timing and how long does it typically take to get approved, to get the funds, once they complete a project, submit for reimbursement. I'm sure that's it depends answer as well, but it probably varies quite a bit.
Yeah, I would say the just kind of going through them, the PJM program for rebates, they only have that auction once a year in the summertime. So any project that gets completed, summer, fall, winter, spring, is then eligible for next year's auction to be, bid in and valued. We won't get into the weeds of it, but there is actually a look back period for that one that you could go back a year. But that's something where, it may be, many, many months before you find out what the value of that rebate is. The Department of Development grants that we've been party to the last year or so, I'd say they've done pretty good, as well as the USDA with the volume of especially the uptick in the volume of projects, where they will typically have some sort of award notification before the next round of funding opportunity. And then also as far as air quality goes, because there is such a strict requirement on the measurement, verification, validating the technical components of the project, that approval process is a little bit more elongated, but they go through a technical review after you've submitted your application, and then it actually goes before the board. You have to do a presentation before the board to, not only validate that your technical review was solid, but then also, what are some of the other, intangible or tangible non-energy, non-environment and benefits of the project. So that can be a couple month process. Again, it also has a stunningly wonderful benefit to it. The last thing I will say on that, because you're right, a lot of it does vary program to program. we've had really great experience working with Department of Development, USDA, air quality, folks with sea power. I learned a number of years ago that was one of the best ways to get into business was to do business and work with folks that are, stand up folks and do the right thing. I would say our experience with all of those agencies is, they, are getting all kinds of questions from all different types of angles, and they're always very thoughtful in their responses and also, willing to work with you as long as you're transparent and open. Hey, here's what my project looks like. What are your thoughts on it? Very, very good to deal with. So we've kind of warehoused a lot of that knowledge here in-house, but at the same time, it's good to have open doors and good connections with folks to get the real-time information and get the right answers, not just any answer.
All right. I'm not seeing any more questions come in. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for attending today. Hope you found the information valuable. As I mentioned, we will be sharing the slides, and you can go out and check out the video at YouTube and just search for Energility. Our next webinar will be Thursday, August 15th, and we hope to see you then. Otherwise, have a great afternoon and happy savings of energy. Take care.